I am live. I'm reading A Lot to Remember. This is largely a travel account by Joan Marshall Grant. There is a lovely little dedication in here. This is a particular part of France, and she says, "To Denys and Charles with love, for a lot to remember." She was married to both of them, not at the same time, obviously. And I am here. She was a writer of far memory books. 7 of them she wrote. A very famous one was Winged Pharaoh, which played in ancient Egypt. Here we are on her travel journey, chapter 9, Chateaux and Châtelaine. The rose-red castle of Castelnau-Bretonneux crowns a great crag which rears up from the placid fields of the Dordogne Valley, 7 kilometers from Saint-Césaire. Its keep was built before William of Normandy conquered England, and by the 100 Years' War it had become a mighty fortress. The massive towered walls are footed by a deep ditch, which must further have discouraged enemies who had managed to reach it before being shot down by the castle bowmen. It seems unlikely that even when a strong force marched against them, the occupants felt much anxiety, for the enemy had to advance across open ground with only impregnable stone walls as a target for their arrows, while the home side, ensconced on the height above, could pick them off at leisure. An easier and less dangerous quarry than the wild boars and wolves they were accustomed to hunt in the neighbouring forests. If a few arrows were flighted high enough to cross the outer walls, it would be a very lucky shot that did more than clatter harmlessly into the courtyard, perhaps startling a horse, of which 200 were stabled within the precincts. The family of Castelnau-de-Bretonneux flourished until 1715, when the dynasty ended through lack of an heir. The castle was sold and resold both before and after the Revolution, and in 1851 the owner attempted to rid of his huge white, or rather rose-red, elephant by insuring it for the equivalent of £1,000 and then trying to destroy it with fire. Fortunately, he only partially succeeded and was so inefficient that the insurance company contested the claim, which resulted in his being gaoled for attempted fraud, and in gaol he died. Soon afterwards, a woman of Saint-Cercle-la-Popie had her 14th child, a son who was christened Jean. When her husband died, neighbours adopted several of the children, for she could take only the 4 youngest with her when she went as femme de ménage to a nearby farm, it being understood that they would earn their keep by working for the farmer when they were old enough. 3 of them did so, but Jean always neglected his chores and wandered off, singing. By the time he was 8, they gave up scolding him and let him look after the goats. He was singing while his goats nibbled at the verges, when along the road strolled an opera singer from Paris, who was so entranced by the quality of the boy's voice that he not only paid for his musical education, but adopted him. The little goatherd sang his way to fame and became Monsieur Jean Moulirat of the Opera Comique, who in 1896 purchased Castelnau-Bretonneux. His mother had by then been dead for many years, but the farmer who had befriended him as a child was still alive, and because he had always wanted to own a vineyard, vines were planted for him at the castle, so that he could enjoy them in the quiet evening of his days. For 38 years, Jean Moulirat divided his genius and his gusto between becoming an even more famous tenor and restoring Castelnau-Bretonneux to much of its former splendor. He wisely did not attempt to rebuild the part of it that had become a picturesque ruin, for there were many rooms untouched by fire, and for these he indefatigably traced the original furniture, which had been sold half a century before to pay the debts of the unlucky arsonist. The habit of collecting must have grown on him, for the rooms are overcrowded, unless, perhaps, some of the furniture was brought here from his home in Paris after his death. A few days before he died, in 1932, he gave the castle and its contents to the state, with a proviso that photographs of himself in his favorite operatic roles should be displayed therein. They look incongruously old-fashioned, and that the two little rooms where his great friend Pierre Loti wrote several books should not be shown to the public until after the death of his, Jean's last surviving relative, who might wish to use them. Presumably, she was still alive when Charles and I went there, for they were not officially on view, although the guide let us see them when we told her that I was writing a book about the lot. After the usual conducted tour, in which we were the only participants, for it was a weekday in June, she gave me a sprig of orange blossom from one of the trees growing in tubs on the rampart garden, and tactfully suggested that we might like to wander around alone while she waited for us at the gatehouse. After lingering in the warm sunshine to enjoy the view, which would have been even more impressive had we bothered to climb one of the towers, we went back to the oratory. Here there is a magnificent triptych, whose quality had been recognized only the year before when someone from the Beaux-Arts sent it to Paris, to be freed from the layers of dirt, no doubt augmented by smoke from the arsonist's fire, that had allowed it to remain undisturbed when the rest of the contents was sold in the 19th century. A full-length portrait of St. Bartholomew as a young man is surrounded by 15 smaller, vividly detailed pictures depicting his life and martyrdom. Yet even the one which shows him being flayed is not horrific, for he smiles so benignly that at first I did not realize why his face was as pink and smooth as a baby's, or why it lacked hair and eyebrows. The executioners who are stripping his skin from the living flesh might be valets, removing his clothes, and a mask, with its long white beard which hangs upside down between his knees, be no more than a disguise he had put on for a fete on a summer evening. As I looked again at the young Bartholomew, I saw that what I had first thought to be a black dog, patient on its haunches beside him, is not a dog, but a small demon. The demon's horns are pricked like the ears of an attentive hound. It wears a collar, and is led by its master on a leash of gold links, a symbol of mutual affection. For Bartholomew was no longer afraid of his demon, no longer trying to starve or scourge it into submission. Instead, he had accepted the responsibility of training it by compassion to work with him in their master's service, as a good shepherd works in charity with his dog. In the oratory of St. Bartholomew, on the 30th of October, 1475, Antoinette de Castelnau-de-Bretonneux married her father's companion in arms, Robert de Balzac. It is a little surprising that he chose her instead of an Italian bride, for he had spent most of his adult life at the Cour of Florence, and Milan and found their culture infinitely more congenial than that of France. He may have married her only because she was so beautiful, and then found she was unbearably dull, or else she was too timid to face foreign travel. I'll check when that interrupted and continue.